The Pittsburgh Steelers just did something that they haven't done in nearly 60 years. They hired a head coach with prior NFL head coaching experience. And it's not just any coach. They hired the guy who beat them in the Super Bowl. Ironically, this is the second offseason in a row that they did this. Last offseason, they signed the quarterback that beat them in the Super Bowl. And this offseason, they decided to hire his head coach at the time. But what's really frustrating for Steelers fans is this is a head coach who's gone 1-3 in the playoffs during his last 4 playoff appearances. And as a result, Steelers fans are absolutely furious. This hire might actually bring back Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, the same Aaron Rodgers who just ended his Steelers season by throwing a pick-6 in what could have been the final pass of his career. The same Aaron Rodgers who spent 13 seasons with Mike McCarthy in Green Bay, and the same Aaron Rodgers who beat Mike Tomlin in the Super Bowl with Mike McCarthy as his coach. So what's going on in Pittsburgh? Why are fans so upset about this hire? And could this actually lead to a Rodgers-McCarthy reunion that nobody saw coming? I'm going to break all of that down for you guys in this video. Mike check 1212. What's going on, everybody? So let's start with how we got here. On January 12th, 2026, the Steelers got absolutely embarrassed at home. A 36 beatdown down by the Houston Texans in the Wildered Round. Aaron Rodgers looked washed, completing just 17 of 33 passes for 146 yards with 0 touchdowns, and that brutal pick-6. The offense looked completely lifeless. And for Steelers fans, it was the final straw in what had become an unbearable pattern. The very next day, January 13th, Mike Tomlin announced that he was stepping down. 19 years, the longest tenure coach in the NFL, the longest tenure head coach in all of major American professional sports gone. Steelers fans were very excited about this. And look, I know what you're thinking. Mike Tomlin was a successful head coach. The man never had a losing season in 19 years. That's literally the longest streak by any head coach to start a career in NFL history. He won a Super Bowl in just his second season, becoming the youngest coach in NFL history to win one at 36 years old. He made the playoffs 13 times, won the AFC North 8 times. The man has a career record of 193, 114, and 2 in the regular season, which ties him with Chuck Noll for the most wins in Steelers history. Hell, look at the way Aaron Rodgers spoke music about this man during his exit interview. You know, when you hear conversation about the Mike Tomlins of the world, Matt LaFleur's of the world, those are two that kind of I played for. And when I first got in the league, there wouldn't be conversation about whether those guys were on the hot seat. But the way that the league is covered now, and the way that there's snap decisions and the validity given to the Twitter experts and all the experts on TV now who make it seem like they know what the hell they're talking about, to me that's an absolute joke. And for either of those two guys to be on the hot seat is really apropos of where we're at as a society and a league, because obviously Matt's done a lot of great things in Green Bay and we had a lot of success. Mike T has had more success than damn near anybody in the league for the last 19, 20 years. And more than that, though, when you have the right guy and the culture is right, you don't think about making a change. But here's the thing that Steelers fans just couldn't take anymore. Mike Tomlin hadn't won a playoff game since January of 2017. That's 9 years without a postseason victory. And it got worse than that. With the loss to Houston, Tomlin tied Marvin Lewis for the most consecutive playoff losses by a head coach in NFL history at 7. 7 straight playoff losses. The first were double-digit blowouts. The one exception was a 45-42 loss to the Jaguars, where the Steelers trailed 28-7 before scoring a meaningless touchdown with 1 second left. And here's where things really started to fall apart. Back in late November, during a brutal 26-7 home loss to the Buffalo Bills, something happened that I don't think anyone ever expected to see at AAR Stadium. The fans started chanting "Fire Tomlin," cheering. Guys, this wasn't just a few people either. It was loud enough that reporters were recording it. It was loud enough that Mike Tomlin was asked about it during his post-game press conference. And you know what Tomlin said? There's a crowd chaining to training to fire you in your own stadium. Man, I share their frustration tonight, man. We didn't do enough. And that's just the reality of it. The man who never loses his cool. The man with all those famous Tomlinisms. He just basically said, "Yeah, I can understand why you want me fired." The Steelers had started the season 4-1 and looked like legitimate contenders. Then they proceeded to lose 5 of their next 7 games. They eventually rallied to finish 10-7 and win the AFC North. But then came that embarrassing wildcard loss. And when you look at the way the Houston Texans season ended, I could understand why Steelers fans were so pissed off. But before that would even happen, the day after getting demolished by Houston at home, Tomlin walked away. Now, whenever you had a head coach that hasn't been delivering the results you've expected for almost 2 decades, obviously you're going to be excited as a football fan to see what the next step is. Are they going to go get some young blue-chip head coach that has a fresh take on how modern football is supposed to be played? Are they going to go get a young hotshot offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator? Maybe Brian Flores, who clearly has established himself as one of the bright defensive minds in the NFL. Maybe they go after Jesse Mentor, who's pretty much viewed as the next coming of Mike McDonald. Or Robert Saleh, who clearly was an incredible defensive mind and built the New York Jets into one of the best defensive teams in football, but was scapegoated when the New York Jets didn't have success. The Steelers moved on from Mike Tomlin early enough to potentially make a run at one of these candidates. But the decision that they would make seemed like a step back or a sideways decision. Here's where the story took a turn that nobody expected. The Steelers have a very specific way of doing things. Since 1969, they've only had 3 head coaches. They had Chuck Noll for 23 years, Bill Cowher for 15 years, and Mike Tomlin for 19 years. That's 3 coaches in 57 years, and all 3 of them had something in common when they were hired. None of them had prior NFL head coaching experience. So, the Steelers' whole philosophy was to find young up-and-coming defensive minds who could grow with the organization. Chuck Noll was a position coach with Don Shula. Cowher was mentored by Marty Schottenheimer. Tomlin was a 1-year defensive coordinator with the Vikings who was only 34 years old when he got the job. So, naturally, Steelers fans expected the team to follow the same blueprint. Brian Flores seemed like the perfect fit. The guy had been a defensive coordinator, had head coaching experience, and seemed like the kind of fiery personality that would mesh with the Steelers' culture. Chris Shula, the Rams' defensive coordinator, was another name being floated around. Young defensive background, exactly what the Steelers usually go for. Instead, on January 25, 2026, 12 days after Tomlin's resignation, the Steelers announced that they were hiring Mike McCarthy, a 62-year-old offensive coach, a guy who had already been fired by the Green Bay Packers mid-season in 2018. A guy who just came off of a 7-10 season with the Dallas Cowboys where he didn't get his contract renewed. A guy who hadn't coached at all in 2025 because nobody really wanted him. And, oh yeah, he's also the guy that beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl back in February of 2011. Here's what's really driving Steelers fans crazy. The whole reason they wanted to move on from Mike Tomlin was because he couldn't win in the playoffs anymore. The man was 8-12 in the postseason overall, 3-10 in his last 13 playoff games. He hadn't won a playoff game in 9 years. So who do they hire to fix this problem? A guy with an 11-11 overall playoff record. A guy who, outside of that one Super Bowl run in 2010, has also struggled massively in the postseason. Let's break down Mike McCarthy's playoff history because it tells a very interesting story. In Green Bay, from 2006 to 2018, he was 10-8 in the playoffs, 9 playoff appearances, 1 Super Bowl victory. That sounds pretty good, right? But when you dig deeper, you see the same pattern that haunted him his entire career. After winning that Super Bowl, McCarthy's Packers made the playoffs 7 more times, but never got back to the big game. They had Aaron Rodgers in his prime, arguably the most talented quarterback to ever play the game, winning MVP after MVP, and McCarthy couldn't get him back to the promised land. They lost in the NFC Championship game multiple times, including that infamous 2014 collapse against Seattle, where they blew a 19-7 fourth-quarter lead and lost in overtime. McCarthy was heavily criticized for his play calling in that game, settling for field goals at the 1-wide line instead of going for touchdowns, running the ball instead of letting Aaron Rodgers make plays when they had the chance to put it away. Then came Dallas. McCarthy was hired by Jerry Jones in 2020, and to his credit, he did deliver 3 straight 12 and 5 seasons from 2021 to 2023. Those were the Cowboys' first 3 consecutive playoff appearances since the Jimmy Johnson dynasty in the early 90s. What happened in those playoffs? 3 one-and-done exits, all in the most embarrassing way possible. Whether it was a ridiculous Dak Prescott QB draw to end their season against the San Francisco 49ers, or this infamous moment where Ezekiel Elliott was the lone snapper at the end of another game against the San Francisco 49ers, and the 2023 playoff loss might have been the worst of his career, The Cowboys were 12-5. They had the number 2 seed. They were hosting the 7-seeded Green Bay Packers in the wild card round. They haven't lost at home all season long. And the Cowboys proceeded to get absolutely demolished 48-32. The Packers led 27-0 before Dallas even got on the board at home against a 7 seed with a roster loaded with talent. Jerry Jones called it one of the most painful losses he'd ever experienced. So Mike McCarthy's playoff record with Dallas 1-3. His one victory came against Tom Brady's Buccaneers in 2022, and then they immediately lost to the 49ers the next week. His Cowboys teams became known for dominating the regular season and completely falling apart in the playoffs. Does that sound familiar? Social media was absolutely relentless with this hire. I mean, Le'Veon Bell went on X and wrote 4-3 incoming, but hey, at least Mike Tomlin isn't the coach of the Steelers anymore, right? Other fans pointed out that no other team was really pursuing Mike McCarthy. There were 9 head coaching openings this cycle. The Ravens, Browns, Cardinals, Raiders, Bills, Falcons, Dolphins, Titans, and Giants were all looking for coaches. How many of them seriously pursued Mike McCarthy? Basically none. Only the Giants really interviewed him. No team truly wanted him. The Steelers were the only team that actually offered him a job. Here's one tweet that went very viral. These people drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round because he went to Pitt and hired Mike McCarthy because he's from Pittsburgh. I can't even fake laugh. This is not funny. And I can't blame Steelers fans. There's a feeling among fans that the organization is making decisions based on sentimentality and Pittsburgh connections rather than actually trying to build a championship team. And this is supposed to be some kind of cute story. I mean, Mike McCarthy was born and raised in the Greenfield neighborhood of Pittsburgh. His father, Joe McCarthy, owned a bar called Joe McCarthy's Bar on Alorn Street. Young Mike used to clean that bar every week before church. He worked overnight shifts as a toll collector on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, while he was a graduate assistant at Pitt from 1989 to 1991. Mike McCarthy was 7 years old when the Pittsburgh Steelers won their first Super Bowl in 1975. He's talked about watching those games at his father's bar, about how the whole city celebrated, about how being a Steelers fan is woven into the fabric of growing up in Pittsburgh. So, there's an emotional component to this hire. This is a kid from Pittsburgh who made it to the NFL, won a Super Bowl, and now gets to come home and coach his childhood team. It's a cute story, but cute stories don't win championships. And Steelers fans have seen this movie before. When the Steelers drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round in 2022, Art Rooney literally said, "Usually I get to say, 'Welcome to Pittsburgh,' and today I get to say, 'Welcome to this side of the building.'" Pickett had just broken all of Dan Marino's records at the University of Pittsburgh, right across the street. The city loved him. The fans were chanting his name from the moment training camp opened. And how did that work out? Kenny Pickett was traded to the Eagles after just 2 seasons. He's now on his 3rd team and has never developed into the franchise quarterback everyone hoped he'd be. The Pittsburgh connection didn't make him a better player, and fans are worried that the same thing is happening here with Mike McCarthy. So, that brings us to another question. What are the Steelers going to do at quarterback this year? Well, there's a wild card that could completely change the trajectory of this franchise, and his name is Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers spent 13 seasons playing for McCarthy and Green Bay. They won 107 games together, which is the 9th most by any head coach starting quarterback duo in Super Bowl era history. Rodgers won multiple MVP awards playing for McCarthy. They won that Super Bowl together in 2011. For all of the talk about their relationship souring towards the end, these two have serious history. And right now, Aaron Rodgers is a free agent. He signed a 1-year deal with the Steelers last June and helped them to a 10-7 record and an AFC North title. Yes, his numbers were down, averaging just 207.6 yards per game, which was a career low for seasons where he played at least 16 games. But his completion percentage was actually his best since his 2021 MVP season at 65.7%. Here's the thing, though. Rodgers came to Pittsburgh for Mike Tomlin. Rooney said that directly. Aaron came here for Mike. Tomlin's resignation made a lot of people assume that Rodgers was done, that he'd finally retire or look elsewhere, but now Mike McCarthy is here, and Tom Pelissero said this on The Rich Eisen Show. And don't discount that if Aaron Rodgers is ever going to play football again. The one person on the planet besides Mike Tomlin he might consider doing that with is Mike McCarthy. I do believe that if Aaron Rodgers were coming back to play for one coach in 2026, it would be Mike McCarthy. Think about the poetry of that. Rodgers and McCarthy haven't worked together since McCarthy was fired in 2018. Their relationship reportedly fractured toward the end, with the offense growing stale and both sides getting frustrated, but time heals wounds. Rodgers said back in 2022 that time always can be a great healer. Not that there needed to be a lot of healing in our relationship. There was always so much love that's always going to connect us and bond us. And with time, it just increased the greater gratitude that I have for him. And here's where it gets even crazier. There's a report that came out toward the end of 2024 where Rodgers told at least one reporter that he'd like to play for Mike McCarthy again before retiring. The Steelers might not have hired McCarthy specifically to lure Rodgers back, but they're definitely hoping that it increases the chances. If Rodgers comes back, you'd have McCarthy, Rodgers, and Will Howard all in the quarterback room together. Howard is a 6th-round pick from 2025, who the team likes as a developmental prospect. Rodgers could serve as a bridge quarterback while also mentoring the next guy. It's the same playbook that worked in Kansas City when Alex Smith mentored Patrick Mahomes. Let me know what you guys think about the Steelers' plan in the comments section down below. I could understand if a lot of you guys are frustrated. Thanks for watching.